I've got the privilege to introduce the second panel, Feelings. Feelings is a bit of a relationship between atmospheres, membranes, and the affects they produce. You see that group of three presentations. The first to discuss their feelings will be the Mars City Design Team. Lara, Hoad, AIA, Todd, Erlandson, AIA, and Vera will be on the team. Lara Hoad oversees the design direction at March Studio, as well as having her own small architecture practice. Or has teaching positions at Otis College of Arts and Design and Woodbury School of Architecture. Todd Erlandson is the principal of March Studio, which he founded in 1998 with his partner Sherry Hoffman. Todd has lectured globally, currently teaches at Otis College of Art and Design and Woodbury School of Architecture. Vera Mulanyi has a background in architecture and filmmaking and is the CEO of the Mars City Design. Mulanyi is also the co-founder and co-organizer for Spaceport LA, a home base for space enthusiasts and professionals living in Los Angeles, California. The second panel discussion will be Tsz Yan Ng, Assistant Professor in Architecture at Tufts College of Architecture and Urban Design, University of Michigan. She is principal of the interdisciplinary practice Tsz Yan Ng design work ranging from architectural commissions to installation art. And the final presenter to Remote Feelings will be Paulette Singley, a professor of architecture at Woodbury University, widely published historian. Her work expands the disciplinary limits across architecture in diverse subject matters such as food, film, and fashion. Following the three presentations, we'll have a group session run by Szenasy, the publisher and editor-in-chief of Metropolis, the architecture and design magazine at all scales, as well as other media platforms, including live events. This panel will end at 2:30 with a 15-minute break before the next panel. And with that, I want Lara's
So, who in this room would like to go to Mars? Hands? Wow, quite a lot of you. Well, today we are going to talk to you about how you can be part of the future of colonisation of Mars. So, what do we know about Mars? Sorry, I was a bit. What do we know about Mars? Its data sols, which are 24 hours and 40 minutes long. It has polar ice caps, mountains, canyons, volcanoes, and evidence of ancient rivers and lakes. However, it takes 6 months to get there, has no atmosphere, 1/3 gravity, and is exposed to radiation. So why are we so intent to go there? Humans have long been obsessed with space travel. From the cities of Tatooine, Mos Eisley, and Naboo, as depicted in Star Wars, to the worlds in Star Trek and beyond, it has become so prevalent that it's permanently permeated our culture. Humans are innately curious and have always wondered about worlds beyond that of our planet Earth. From Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind to Ridley Scott's Martian, our imaginations are constantly being transported to places that delight and inspire. Exploration is in our DNA. The will to go into the depths of space has always been there. We've just not had the technology or the capacity to go. I just realised this is a little stretched out. It's not meant to be like that. Anyway. But a window of time of choose presented itself to us, which will turn Mars from a sci-fi fantasy to a tangible reality. As National Geographic stated in September 2016, the race is on. NASA is a huge player and has a very comprehensive plan to build a base on Mars. in order to explore, research, and find out more about the planet and its environmental conditions. For many years, the NASA rovers have been roaming the surface collecting data to facilitate the arrival of humans. This image is a selfie taken by Curiosity, showing us just how Earth-like the landscape is there. But it is corporations and the emergence of space tourism that is really going to propel colonisation. Virgin Galactic, owned by Richard Branson, and Blue Origin, owned by Jeff Bezos, have developed and designed rockets purely for space tourism to be affordable, relatively speaking. In 2018, Elon Musk will fly 2 tourists around the moon on a 6-day voyage. And it's Elon Musk and SpaceX who are leading the way in the race to Mars with their reusable rocket success and their plan for colonisation. Musk predicts that Mars will be colonised in 2100. He believes that there is an intersection of the population who both want to go to Mars and who can afford to go to Mars, and that equals to around 1 billion people. The SpaceX transporter will utilise the reusable rocket technology and bring up to 200 people per trip. The initial base will rapidly turn into a city. So what does this actually mean for the human race? We can rely on engineers and scientists to solve many of the technical challenges presented to us by the extreme environmental conditions on Mars, but what effect will living on Mars have on the human psyche? In 2003, psychologists Nick Kansas and Dietrich Manzi explored this concept in their book Space Psychology and Psychiatry, stating that an internal uncoupling could occur, the consequences of which could be far-reaching and extremely damaging. The fact of the matter is that we are a very long way from home, 33.9 million miles to be exact. How can we measure what it will really be like to be separated from our home planet? Will we suffer from extreme homesickness? How will our relationship to Mother Earth change? Will she become part of a distant fantasy recalled only in our dreams? In anticipation of the reality of going to Mars, there are governmental experiments that have started to explore the psychological effects of such separation, such as isolation, limited access to daylight, issues of privacy and socialisation. Mars 500 is a Russian experiment where 7 astronauts were placed in a simulation for 520 days to test some of these psychological effects. They expressed many of the aforementioned conditions, but it was very difficult to truly assess their severity as they are ever aware that they are still on planet Earth. The High Seas test, NASA test, is another experiment where 5 people live in a simulated dome environment for 1 year. But again, accurate assessment is challenging when they're actually located on the surface of Hawaii. And this is the interior of the dome that they had to live in for 1 year. Artist and space enthusiast Angelo Vermeulen spent a year in the High Seas experiment and on exit developed the isolation pod installation to explore the concept of living in confined habitats for normal people, i.e. those who might not go through the physical and psychological vetting required for a governmental astronaut, but who might be a space tourist like that of SpaceX. This is the interior, and as with the other 2 experiments, there appears to be no specific design consideration per se, and how that interior architecture might attempt to alleviate the effects of living in such environments. Perhaps the most useful experiment was that of NASA astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a whole year away from home on the International Space Station. He cited extreme stress as one of the effects of being there, but is it any surprise when he has to exist in an environment like this?
So who wants to go to Mars in this? So once we are in space, we are so vulnerable that we need support to survive physically and psychologically. So what is the concept of home when we are so removed from our actual home planet? When Elon announced to move 1 million people to Mars by 2100, I realized this is not going to be just a base. This will be a city. For me, Mars is an opportunity to do things differently, an opportunity to sustainable innovations, especially for architects and designers who have the capacity to envision a new world beyond our everyday window sections. Mars City Design was created to allow these innovative ideas to spur a platform where architects and designers can operate. This is why the work together here is so important. So this is Green Cloud City. It's a project that was submitted last year to our competition, and it is one of the winners. It offers the way to solve the effect of radiation without needing to protect ourselves by living underground, because these bubbles contains the part and the calculation of water that can actually filter the UV radiation. Neurosynthesis is the 3D printed project that is using biomimicry to organize the city to maximize its efficiency by mimicking the way the human brain interconnects, how our thoughts and actions connect. This project addressed the challenge of landing on Mars. Only few missions have successfully managed to land on the surface without significant damage to date. Inspired by the way a dandelion seed punctures the ground as it lands and creates a stable foundation containing all the nutrients it needs to survive. The head of the seed is this dome under which an indoor garden will thrive. If you want to know more about these three projects, we have the thesis over here. So this, the great thing is that we have, architecture and profession of architecture and design profession. We don't have to be a teacher to build a school. We don't have to be a priest to build a church. And we don't have to be a Martian to build on Mars. But we do need to have an understanding of human needs and the Martian conditions, because even if we go to Mars, we are still human. In order to be able to test out some of these ideas and concepts, we are fortunate enough to have a Martian-like environment on our doorstep in the form of Mojave Desert. This is the Red Rock Canyon that is only an hour and a half from here. So Mars City Design, now we are collaborating with California City in the Mojave Desert to build some of these prototypes, which will also provide housing solutions for local aerospace companies, communities that work in the Mojave Desert. So this is the design that we chose to become the Mars City Research Center, providing new science space center. It will become a destination, a space science retreat, only 1 hour from Los Angeles. The prototype will be 3D printed in order to explore the challenges presented by the fact that we will need to build on Mars using the existing regolith. Only the material that is in situ, because we cannot fly a rock from here. So this image is an example of a 3D printed unit that was created in just 10 hours. This is Enrico Dini, one of the first 3D printing company that is very successful. Not only does this utilize the existing available building material, it is efficient with regards to budget, time, and energy. Even though all of these projects are ultimately intended for Mars, we hope that the innovation that they ignite will become a catalyst for unlimited creativity and solutions for problems that we have here on Earth, now and in the future. Imagine if we can grow trees in the in the desert.
Okay. So I just want to say first how grateful I am to be presenting with these two super passionate and curious people. And Lara and I worked together at March Studio, but I know if there was a space available, she would take off to Mars tomorrow. And Vera is really a committed architect, and through her Mars City Design is making sure that architects and designers participate or have a space to participate in this discussion. So I'm really I'm really glad to be supporting them. Lara and I are currently teaching a studio at Woodbury University that looks at interiors of space transports and space habitations with our students. And Vera has generously committed her time inspiring students and introducing us to amazing people in the field. So what are other architects currently doing in the design of space habitation? This project was designed by the office of Sir Norman Foster for a NASA competition. It's a 3D printed modular habitat constructed by pre-programmed robots prior to the arrival of humans on Mars. So you can see those tiny robots driving on 3D printing these habitats. It seems like an adequate solution for first teams on Mars that immediately follow the construction process. But the interiors don't seem to offer much to the inhabitants related to our physical and emotional needs so far from Earth, with little connection to light or the Martian landscape, and minimal references or replications of nature. The Mars Ice House by New York architects Search and Clouds A.O. is a different story. It draws on the abundance of water and the lower temperatures on Mars to create a habitat of nested domes, each 5 centimeters thick, printed from ice. The exterior shell protects inhabitants from solar radiation and Martian weather, while the interior shell maintains an Earth-like atmosphere. The transparency of the ice connects the crew to cycles of day and night and allows interior plants to grow without artificial light. So it's a good alternative to having to live below ground on Mars to protect yourself from the radiation. We see in many projects being produced today some kind of connection to nature, which may be the most important connection to Earth that we will need to build into our habitats. According to an article by the University of Minnesota, nature heals, nature soothes, nature restores, nature connects. And nature deprivation, defined as a lack of time in the natural world, has been associated, unsurprisingly, with depression. Biophilic design suggests that even virtual reality, as depicted here, has a positive effect on our well-being through immersion in nature-like environments. The Sparrow House, by a French company called Fabulous, is designed as 2 3D printed domes with a 30 centimeter protective layer of water in between. This allows for natural light, the ability to grow real plants indoors, and provides what the designers call a constant reminder of the main element of the mother planet, water, an almost embryonic environment. The German architecture firm Tsz Yan Ng Architecture are proposing a project excavated into the Martian surface by solar-powered robots that utilizes natural forms to create a cathedral-like reference to a forest canopy. When combined with access to natural light from above and the inclusion of real planted elements, this design will serve as a reminder to inhabitants of Earth-like natural spaces. As cities grow and as larger communal spaces become necessary, many projects turn to high, long-span, well-lit volumes filled with nature. Basalt fiber is a product that can be manufactured from basalt rock on Mars, and it's very similar to carbon fiber used here on Earth. So it can be used in the construction of these buildings and long-span structures. Tristan Nathanwood is an architect who spent 6 months in the High Seas project that Lara showed previously. And he was also interviewed by our students by Skype regarding their projects that they're working on now. He's currently working on a habitation project that is more human and nature-centric than what he experienced in Hawaii, incorporating nature-filled domes arranged on a Martian landscape. Finally, this futuristic rendering that accompanied an article about SpaceX in the Daily Mail describes a long-term vision for Mars habitation called terraforming, or developing large-scale Earth-like environments by actually producing an atmosphere similar to that on Earth and planting directly in Martian soil. This can happen within large enclosed environments as depicted here. But in thousands of years, some scientists believe that we can actually transform the atmosphere of Mars itself into something that's much more Earth-like.
So that's pretty much the end of our presentation, but we just wanted to leave with this one last thought. For centuries, Mars has captivated us and captured our imaginations. Humans are those who looked at Mars and registered it as an extraterrestrial body in the second millennium, before the Common Era. It was logged by the Zhou dynasty, noted by the Egyptians, observed by the Babylonians, described by the Greeks, measured by Southern Asians, and now, in the coming decades, shall be colonized by architects. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank the organizers of this symposium, bringing in such interdisciplinary people together, so I'm excited to be here. I usually talk with my hands a lot, so this is a little weird. First of all, I want to thank the organizers of this symposium, bringing in such interdisciplinary people together, so I'm excited to be here. I usually talk with my hands a lot, so this is a little weird. I'm hoping that that's better. So this presentation highlights two sister industries, that of clothing manufacturing and architectural production. Inherent in both are questions of labor, which are usually demonstrated in both the made artifact, as in the skill labored, embodied, and visible in the final product, and also in the labor that went into the making of it, as in the work of the labor force that is largely invisible and divorced from the thing being manufactured. So drawing from research and creative work in the last 8 years, centered on questions of labor in both architecture and clothing manufacturing, I want to discuss specifically for this presentation one of the most labor-intensive processes for both industries, that of form or mold making, as the site where labor could be invisible. For architecture, it's concrete forming, and in a comparative manner for clothing manufacturing, we'd like to discuss pleating. The rumination on labor began with this project, Life 148 New York, which I worked on in collaboration with Vera. The project, completed in 2010, is an 11-story clothing manufacturing facility for the fashion label Lafayette 148 New York, located in Shanghai, China. To give you an overview, the building has 7 factory levels, sandwiched by a double-height showroom on the ground level and offices and design studio on the upper 2 floors. Comfort for the factory workers was key to our design objectives. That was the imperative, because it is a factory. So carvings were introduced to the overall building volumes to bring light and air into the core of the building. These through-level carvings create a chimney effect to promote natural ventilation, sucking hot and humid air out of the building. There's a double layer skin of concrete bristle which you see as that piece that wraps around the building, and an operable glazing system that maintains interior comfort level, even for the factory levels, for the factory floors up to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is in Shanghai, which is a tropical climate, so it's actually quite humid, but AC is usually used only when the humidity is high and it compromises the textile. The combination of these task cooling strategies not only reduces energy consumption for the building by about 40%, but also creates interior courtyards to literally breathe. We used a post-tension system, which enabled us to span a much wider factory floor without column interruptions, about 56 feet by all the services you see on that diagram, such as elevators, stairs, bathrooms, are all organized in the north side of the building. But perhaps the most critical and expressive part of the building is the textile-like facade that wraps from the west to south to the east side. When we first started this project, we learned that practically every single building in Shantou was made of concrete. Not the best quality, usually a rigid frame filled with bricks and then plaster or tile over. So all the concrete work was cast into place because there's an abundance of labor. We originally requested, for the sake of cost, precast slabs for factory levels, but we learned that there were no precast in this region. So with this in mind, we decided to have this rather unique local building practice where cast in place was more affordable and feasible than other options. Hence, labor became critical to the development of the project, especially for the reselling. Instead of orthogonal reselays, we wanted to twist them to evoke the feel of the woven fabric. We used 5 different angles in different combinations to create a smooth and continuous twist appearance. The twisting also served to control lighting levels down in the inside for the factory workers and opening up the carvings to promote air ventilation. The perforations you see here is actually developed out of we were making the molds for casting, where if you twist something bilaterally, you have to release that pressure so that the material has a way to move. So in making the molds, we developed this perforation system. The holes were also at the end a way to lighten the concrete panels, and the panels are about 7 feet long by 3¼ feet wide, a little less than 8 inches deep. So the holes also were useful during the construction process where chains could actually wrap through the holes, and you can transport them and also drop them and set them into place. So during fabrication, the panels are specified by floors. When one floor is finished, the panels will cast, and for the floors below, so the panels are then actually brought to the edge of the building and then dropped to the facade. So in a sense, the factory floors were first used for manufacturing of the building itself. Depending on the time of day and the lighting condition, the facades almost materialize. Something that was not expected of concrete, something that's heavy and kind of this brutal association. So in a sense, we were trying to work with the feeling of fabric that's light, that is extremely transparent in many ways, especially in terms of thinking about labor and clothing manufacturing. So this is a more detailed view of the same area of the facade with the different lighting conditions. So after working on that project with some close-up understanding of the clothing manufacturing industry, I started looking at the parallels between the two industries. They're both global manufacturing, and they share many affinities ranging from techniques of making as well as how labor itself is divided in its production. And this also includes skilled and unskilled forms of labor in the different stages of manufacturing. So in this case, I'm going to an example of homemaking. This is a traditional process for pleating silk. The molds are basically paper that has been cut on both sides, folded up, and a piece of silk usually is sandwiched between the molds, and then held together and then steamed, and the pleat actually sets in place because of the steam. And as you can imagine, this is incredibly labor-intensive. So this process is usually used for agricultural houses. But incidentally, in China, there are a lot of pleating facilities now because there are a lot of cheap labor and available labor to do so. But I want to turn to pleating and how it was reconsidered in the early 90s by Tsz Yan Ng. Most of us are familiar with his pleats collection. The clothing are lightweight, structured by folds, and are unique in how it drapes on the body. What was ingenious of the Yankees design team was not so much repeating the same process for pleating, but feed a completed piece of garment through the pleating machine, and the heat roller would set the pleats in this mechanical feeding. The refinement of this technology took over a decade and included working with textile specialists to develop the right polyester thread to knit the perfect lightweight textile for the pleating machines. And one of the first to develop, they were the first to develop one of the digital inkjet printing onto textiles. The innovation of this pleating process produced novel forms and beautiful pieces of clothing, launching a design line that has been around for over 20 years. But it also corrected the industry by pushing innovations along every step of the way in the making of this product. So if we take this as an example and comparatively ask, can architecture design, especially concrete forming, be reinvested in life? Given that concrete is one of the most rigorously used materials for building around the world, could concrete forming, or better yet, could the formwork itself, where labor is most invested, be reconsidered? Especially given the type of technology and fabrication tools that we have today, can we do better? That was the premise for a current project that I'm working with this past year with faculty from Michigan, West Virginia. It's called thermoplastic concrete casting. And the project actually stemmed from an installation I worked on in the fall of 2015 called the Visibility of Labor. And the basic premise of the project asks how many pair of hands were going to was actually a piece of shelter, piece of equipment today. Of course, this piece of clothing and study and we're going to actually about to shelter to department for the it's followed in this piece of clothing that you see here and actually make it out of the requirements and pass from each department the different types of work the department, the words of making that it requires, and then pass from each department a pair of hands from the workers. And also incidentally is in the way that each garment that we wear, there's what they call an industrial engineering report. Basically, it lists exact type of labor along with the kind of economic value and time attached to that piece of clothing as a way to measure whether that piece of clothing is worth production. So this is something that is very interesting as we think about how architecture is produced and trying to process it out that way and actually understand, are we going for the bottom line or are there other ways to rethink the design of making architecture? There were 17 pair of hands in the gallery, each of the gestures decided by the workers themselves that demonstrated their labor. And in the gallery, the hands looks like it's pushing out from the wall, so it actually looks like it's elastic. And my hands are in the front of the space was basically a storefront that actually sold clothing before, but the storefront window had my hands holding the dress for display. This is the cutter's hands, and these are cast plasters, so the fidelity to all the cuts and creases of one's lifetime of labor is actually embedded in their hands. This is the kind of thread cutter's hands and the gestures. And this is the designer. So I'm not going to talk too much about this project anymore, but I'm going to continue. But what's important about this project was actually the material that I used to make the hands look like it's pushing out of the wall. That material is the thermoplastic, and it's a non-woven polyester that you can cut, sew up, and pattern into any shape, essentially. And the thermoplastic shrinks a little bit, and it then stiffens so that you can actually create extremely complex surfaces. And when I was working on this project, I thought, well, it would be amazing to use this to cast concrete with, because molds usually are very difficult to make, and they're heavy. They're usually in a subtractive process. They're milled out or actually layered and then shaped to complex contours. So this was a really interesting way to think about concrete work. So you see, what I saw in this material was to develop pieces that were anywhere from a quarter inch to about half, 3/8 of an inch. And so the glass fiber actually is extremely strong and thin. There's me actually heating the thermoplastic. We worked in 2 different scales, one which is trying to be architectural, so these are panels that actually fit together to become a wall. And in fact, it's being demolded as we speak, so sorry I don't have any images in the final form, but the idea was that these are extremely complex surfaces of thin concrete panels. And this is the other view with the thermoplastic stretch. And then the other scale that we wanted to use was a kind of object-wide scale, and we thought that what are the objects that is extremely curved and can really push the idea of working with this thermoplastic. So one of the object, the iconic chairs, the Eames fiberglass molded fiberglass chair, and the wooden chair as well. So these were the molds that we made for the casting. And there's the 8th spring demold with GFRC. And this is the concrete chair at the end. You can see some of the panels in the background. There's 3 more that essentially fits into place. And this is basically the full with some of this cut off with the wooden chair. So in conclusion, through expanding purpose that technology plays in both fashion and architecture, and oftentimes in direct exchange, emerging forms of creative thinking are possible that could challenge traditional forms of production that address contemporary concerns when it comes to labor and manufacturing. Labor could be more carefully theorized to better address not only the ethos of making, but also how it ultimately could be more integrated with how and what we make as designers, architects, and fabricators in each step of the way. Thank you.
First of all, I just wanted to say how honored and simultaneously humbled. First of all, I just wanted to say how honored and simultaneously humbled I am by the incredibly high quality of the presentations I've seen so far. They really set the bar very, very high. Excellent curation on the part of the local people who organized this event. Some incredibly great choices. Okay. A literal interpretation of unmentionables as both underwear in its most transparent guise of lingerie and architectural concepts of which we dare not speak identifies an emerging form of enclosure where architecture inhales and exhales interior spaces. Particular zones describe compressed atmospheres, sweaty surfaces, stretched and tensile wrappers, beguiling spatial conditions, the pellucid dissolution of architectural surfaces, and undergarments peeping out as unspeakable acts of ornament. Stemming from the Latin pellus, meaning skin, this term has evolved to encompass words such as leather, fur, parchment, hide, film, layer, membrane, scum, or a thin, partially reflective coating. It generated the English pellicle, a thin skin or film, such as an organic membrane or liquid film, or the Italian pellicola trasparente, a plastic wrap good for cooking, conserving, and protecting. As far as the transparency and invisibility of pellicular zones go, Philip Johnson put it well by stating, I I have very expensive wallpaper to describe the way in which the walls of his glass house stage views as surface material. Scum, paint, dyes, and cosmetics produce follicular zones, the thinnest and most pliable fusion of the material to the surface it covers. These peculiar folliculars envelop architecture in spaces of otherness and intimacy that dematerialize a building's status as a barely penetrable solid. Just as lingerie is made to seduce, follicular zones entrance, distract, and lead architecture astray from any strong distinction between inside and out. Next to the silk film left on skin after bathing, lingerie is just about the last apparel we wear before completely undressing, except perhaps for fragrance. Certainly olfactory spaces compose follicular zones. To quote Marilyn Monroe, "What do I wear in bed? Why, Chanel No. 5, of course." Generally transparent, lacy, and close-fitting, lingerie adheres to skin as a filmy layer. Film and lingerie closely relate to each other as architectural states of dress and undress. This presentation identifies the potential for follicular zones, surfaces of film, scum, paint, stains, cosmetics, and atmospheres that dematerialize architecture status of enclosure into ephemeral surfaces of the barest materials. Two recent scholars have considered the status of surfaces and glimmer on the skin of the buildings Herzog and Demerin have produced. Vittorio Di Palma and Jeffrey Kipnis have both looked at their architecture in terms of what we might consider to be follicular surfaces. In her essay, Blurs, Blocks, and Clouds, Architecture and the Dissolution of the Surface, De Palma analyzes the Eberswald Library of 1999, where the architects screened photographic images onto glass and concrete cladding systems. The firm collaborated with the photographer Thomas Ruf, who selected images from a private collection of magazines to curate the images screen-printed on the library's exterior. As the architects state, the imprint on the entire facade unifies the surface and annuls the differences between concrete and glass. I would add that the difference between surface and ornament also disappears as buildings become canvases for artists to develop into their work. At the Leban Dance Center in London in 2003, polycarbonate panels questioned the relationship between architecture and color. At the Leban Dance Center, the architects collaborated with Michael Craig Martin to expose exterior facades of transparent and translucent glass panels that produce an effect in which the shadow images of the dancers, which fall onto the mantle of the glass surfaces of the interior walls and facades, have a magical effect and play an active part of Leban's architectural identity. As Kipnis argues in The Cunning of Cosmetics, a personal reflection on the architecture of Herzog and Demerin, at the signal box in Switzerland, each copper band was painstakingly warped to engender a mesmerizing, ephemeral gesture in light, shadow, and form over a large area of skin. While the architects claim the copper coiling acts as a Faraday cage to protect the electronic equipment inside from unexpected external effects, Kipnis contends this is merely a smokescreen. He arrives at the conclusion that the signal box is entirely a matter of cosmetics, a hypnotic web of visual seductions that emanate entirely from the copper band system. A system, it should be said, that is in fact not the building's actual skin, which lies just beneath. It only poses as the building's skin. Kipnis also considers the Ricola Europe production and storage building in France. As the architects explain, the black concrete walls composing the side elevations of this building provide for rainwater to run down their surfaces into a bed of gravel, forming a natural drawing made from a fine film of plant life. They choreographed the film of scum as surface material. On the front facade, they silk screened a photograph by Karl Blossfeld, featuring a repetitive plant motif onto transparent polycarbonate facade panels, suggesting a textile curtain that creates a relationship to the site's trees and shrubs. Kipnis interprets this building as introducing a new coherence to architecture's conventional polarity between ornamentalism and minimalism. As he writes, during the day, the images are rarely visible, emerging only fleetingly as hallucinations when hit at exactly the right angle by glancing light. But when backlit at night, the leaf pattern takes on an empty, numbing, camp fascination of a Warholian wallpaper. For Kipnis, this slick, eye-catching device belies the range and depth of technique Herzog and Marin exercised in realizing the full cosmetic sophistication of the work. What precisely is cosmesis, or cosmesis, and how might it tease out unmentionable architectures? Vitruvius' architectural triad argues that a building should be solid, useful, and beautiful. This phrase is more commonly referred to as commodity, firmness, and delight, with beauty having been segregated from the conversation. The Latin terms Vitruvius used for his triad, however, are firmitas, utilitas, and venustas, introducing the goddess Venus and her numerous guises into architectural theory. Mario Perniola explains that the Latin term for beauty, literally the salient qualities possessed by the goddess Venus, venustas, clearly imply a visual quality in architecture that would arouse the emotion of love. I guess these are my feelings now. Perniola considers the plural implications of Venusian architecture that would arouse the emotion of love. Perniola considers the plural implications of Venusian charm with a name referring to veninum, which relates to venom in fact, but it also means dye, tint, color, and by extension makeup, maquillage. Venus then is particularly pellicular. The term cosmetic in turn derives from the ancient Greek kosmetike techne, meaning a technique of dress and ornament, and from cosmos, meaning cosmos, order and ornament. So in this sense, cosmetics are cosmic. Given the potential for architecture to be undermined by its own decorative program, it is little surprise then that Adolf Loos would struggle with ornamentation in his landmark essay, Ornament and Crime, from 1908. In a piece of writing that has left the indelible impression on architects that ornament is a crime, Loos counters this principle by acknowledging that the urge to ornament one's face and everything within one's reach is the origin of fine art. And yet, Loos describes the beginnings of architecture as pellicular, writing, originally consisting of animal furs or textiles, this covering is the earliest architectural feature. He expressed this sentiment most clearly in the bedroom he designed for his wife Lena, featuring a pale blue wall-to-wall carpet covered with an Angora rabbit fur rug that curls up to the base of her bed. Despite what we may see as the legitimate origins of ornament, pure and unadulterated ornamentation on buildings maintains the propensity to offer the pleasure of transgressing architecture's proper boundaries. With just a thin coat of gold, Rem Koolhaas and OMA transformed an existing building into an exhibition space at Fondazione Prada's offices in Milan. They named this gold building the Haunted House. This is one of 7 existing permanent buildings on the site. The firm devised a compositional strategy for an older structure to stand out by cladding it in 24-karat gold leaf that dematerialized its form into pure shimmer, and which, according to Koolhaas, was more affordable than traditional cladding such as marble or paint. Koolhaas may not have been entirely innovative in using what might be considered an iconoclastic surface material for secular architecture. It should be remembered that Frank Lloyd Wright recommended gold leaf to cover the concrete exterior of falling water. Experiments in art and technology, Pepsi Pavilion for the Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan, predates the Blur building by a good 30 years. Sorry, I think I'm out of sync here. Okay. When Kipnis references the idea of a smokescreen, he introduces a term that is more than metaphor. Diller's co-video and Renfer's Blur building, designed for the Swiss Expo of 2002, is a smokescreen design disguised as a cloud. Experiments in art and technology's Pepsi Pavilion for Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan, predates the Blur building by a good 30 years. He collaborated with the artist Fujiko Nakaya for her design of the skin of fog engulfing the pavilion. And just a bit earlier, Hans Happe explored the interior space of sweating in a clear plexiglass box called Condensation Cube from 1963 to 1965. The zeitgeist of the 1960s research into natural models for the dissolution of interior and exterior barriers finds Fry Otto experimenting with soap bubbles, the ultimate filming material. The work culminated in his developing a tensile structure for the exhibition pavilion for the Republic of Germany at Expo 67 World's Fair in Montreal, Canada. While Otto's tensile enclosures offer a model for eroding distinctions between interior and exterior surfaces as total environments, his bubbles, like Klein models, haunt architecture with the promise of minimal surfaces built of soap film that can turn inside out. More recently, Philippe Rome explored architecture as meteorological space in Digestible Gulf Stream, built for the Venice Biennale of 2008. Rome argues that architecture's role is to create temperatures and atmospheres instead of spaces. He suspended two metal planes at different heights in order to construct spatial division from thermal flow. He heated the lower plane to 28 degrees centigrade and cooled the upper one to 12 degrees centigrade, constructing a space where rising hot air cools on contact with the upper sheet, falls, and then is reheated on contact with the hot sheet, creating a constant thermal flow akin to an invisible landscape. In 1972, House Rucker installed Oasis No. 7 at Documentary 5, where the building seems to be exhaling a spherical bubble of interior space from its facade into a transparent room for lounging in a tropical environment. In 2007, Kengo Kuma designed the floating tea house for the World Tea Festival in Japan. Writing about this project, Kuma states, "It seems that a tea house is, after all, a kind of device of virtual reality." He produced a floating body made from a large balloon filled with helium gas, and then enclosed the space with an exceptionally light cloth called super organza. And in 2013, Mary Oxman produced a pavilion based on an enclosure constructed in real time and space by silkworms. Apropos of 1960s spatial thought, in Architecture of the Well-Tempered Environment, 1969, Rainer Bannon diagrammed the difference between campfires and tents when advocating for an environmentally responsive architecture unrestrained by the weight of massive immobile walls. Campfires radiate heat and light to produce a warm flow that brings people together. In contrast, the tent's membrane deflects wind and excludes rain, but it also segregates people. Due to its ability to produce space through gradient heat patterns instead of parietal walls, pellicular architecture privileges the campfire. The campfire describes an architecture produced by environmental rather than structural systems, offering a model for experimental enclosures that rely on radiation, convection, and air movement. While the deterritorialized zone of film and convection, as Otto's bubble research suggests, may seem to be utopian in terms of future yet-to-be materialized envelopes, these pellicular spaces are much closer than one may think. Annie Chu and I recently analyzed the space of entrances and entrancement in the theater district on Broadway Avenue in Los Angeles, exploring the way in which interiors exhale into urban space. We discovered numerous pellicular zones, but because they are generally unseen, we tend not to notice the pliable bubbles of space they describe. Outdoor heaters, smoking domes, misters, thermal thresholds, air curtains, glowing light from the inside out, condensation on windows, and even internet cafes constitute molecular zones already in place. As Nakaya's fog installation at Johnson's Glass House in 2014 indicates, the design of apparatuses that prolong or embed interior spaces into themselves or to the exterior realm offers emerging sites for architectural research that blurs interior and exterior boundaries. They also serve as spatial ornaments, augmenting the environment with often superficial or extraneous devices to create spaces of pleasure that provide added comfort to our epidermis, to the molecular zone that contains our bodies. Thank you.
Woodbury right now. When we first met with Vera, we were talking about kind of the architectural typologies. We said that we artists and designers, we don't understand the science of the technology like this. And so she said, yes, but no one's really looking at the psychology. No one's really thinking about that. So the work that we're doing in the studio, we've identified sort of some psychological conditions like isolation, privacy, access to daylight, things that are unique to the potential environments on Mars, and they're things that we decided to explore. So it felt like feelings was a good kind of bridge to start discussing that work.
So the Mars work is very informed by the Earth's functions and how we move up on the Earth, and who we are as creatures of the Earth. Is there any discussion about what happens when generations of Martians get born and develop and have not seen Earth? Or is the Mars program thought about as a back and forth between Earth and outer space, so that it becomes an exchange between planets? Because it's a really fascinating question for me. It's like, what makes us human where we are, and how do we become another human where we will be? Any Vera, anything there?
Yeah, actually, okay, this one works. So there's a lot of questions now because I think in 2014, suddenly there are not only just Elon Musk, but this group of people called Mars One who attempted to let's just go. They don't even think, they think it's cool to go to Mars and die and become the first humans to go there. It was actually very inspiring for someone like me, for example. Like, what if we go there and live and expand as a human species to be interplanetary? I come from a long way. I come from Southeast Asia. It doesn't sound very far right now, but when I look back, it was really impossible. So this is where we're at right now, thinking, wow, Mars is almost impossible. If you want to go there and come back, you will have to wait until the orbit comes back to closer to Earth again, and let's hope that your rocket can still have fuel to come back here. But not only that, we have our astronauts coming back to Earth from space station. We have like hundreds and thousands of people working on welcoming them, taking them physically, helping them out from the capsule. But who is going to do that when we arrive on Mars? So I don't know if I answered the questions that we're still far away from thinking of going back and forth as an interplanetary species, like living on Mars, like, hey, my cousin is coming tomorrow from Mars. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen very soon, but we're still trying to think, do we have have to transform physically to adapt to the Martian atmosphere, or do we have to create a different type of life and type of home architecture to live there?
So I think that's really interesting because I think exploration itself is interesting because in order to understand our life on Mars, we have to understand our life on Earth. And it forces us to really think about who we are and how we relate to the natural world around us and how we are formed by it. And so that in itself is a hugely important exercise for us because frankly, we might as well be living on Mars as far as our buildings are concerned. We're not living on we're locking everything out, we're locking everything away. So I think it's a fabulous exercise that you are going through and we are witnessing what you're going through. So whatever becomes humanity, we'll figure it out. So I'm kind of not worried about that, but I am interested in what makes us human now. So I think, let's see, your idea of feelings.
My idea of feelings. My idea of feelings is actually much more grounded in the way we think about materiality, because there's so much innovation in the material culture, what we develop, what's the new science, what's the next material, what's the capability and performance. But ultimately, the feelings is actually come back to the human scale. They come back to tactility. They come back to how we relate to our material world. So I think it's always going to be very much about touch. So anything from the scale of the touch to the scale in which we can begin to perceive our environment. And by perceiving, that is in all five senses. I think that's always going to be the case.
So what's really interesting about this is that so much of the process of making today is hidden from us. It's digital, it's programmed, it's sort of done by people who understand how to run machines. And at the same time, we marvel at how do you make this? How is that made? That breathe this away. It sort of invokes this idea in us of curiosity about material, about what's there. So is that what you mean about really understanding the maker from the form that they were able to create? Because I still don't quite understand how making today reveals our humanity.
I think that there is a kind of polarization between what we marvel at and the novelty of the things that we make. And I think that's why I want to open up that discussion about how we make along every step of the way, as a way to really expose the kind of labor that it takes. And so much of it is invisible, and actually it's incredibly valued as well. So even at the level of the skilled, the unskilled, and even the way in which I think as designers, we have the incredible intellectual labor that goes into linking all of these things together, that there should be some theorization in the in-between process of thinking about opening that discussion up.
I think that's so important because the idea that we've been disempowered as human beings is the kind of product of the 20th century. I mean, we talked a lot about robots as little machines, and when you assess what we did to ourselves in terms of where we worked, how rote a lot of the things that we did, we became the robots of the 20th century, and now we're becoming kind of these creatures that begin to understand that we're much more than that. So I think your exploration is really key to all of this, and I can't wait to kind of see about how you discover, how you convey the idea of what making is in the 21st century, because it certainly is much more fascinating than it's ever been. So Paulette, feelings.
I don't really like having feelings. It would be my preference not to, but I think that there's a reason. It's not just being cheeky. in my education and background in architecture, the cognitive is privileged over the bodily, and the bodily is where we feel. And so we're supposed to be in our heads, and we're supposed to be rational, but the bodily feelings, the lower viscera, tend to be repressed. And so it's not that I don't like them, I think I just learned that we're not supposed to have them. But I wanted to go back now, because I think there's some things we could tie in here together that I think would be really interesting, which is I really enjoy the false etymology between mater, as in the mother figure, and material. I wish that it were really an etymology, but since it isn't, I'm going to pretend it is. And I think that the idea being that in the kind of mind-body Cartesian dualism, the separation of the material, the making, the hands, from the mind and the cognitive is something really important. So I feel your work very deeply. In terms of my own presentation, I would just say that I think that the idea of a building that is able to emote or convey how it feels is a whole different kind of thing. And that for me, it's the beautiful intersection of affectation, which is not such a good thing, and affect, which I think a lot of architects are exploring this time.
Okay, so because Paulette talked about the skin, the translucent, transparent, thin skin that we are looking at. Todd, you guys work as architects, but you're also looking at the Martian atmosphere, and I would think that thinness of skin, and it's not sort of like building forts, but really working on something that lets in light, that provides the ability to grow something under whatever sunlight there is, or gives us something, some connection to some kind of outward light that is not electrical, but produced by the sun. How do you feel about that kind of thin, high-performing materials that you're looking at for the Martian world, and how that might translate into our use on Earth now with what's available in the science in that area?
Well, it's very interesting because I feel like there's a real dichotomy in the things that we've been looking at, where we need to be protected from the radiation of the sun, which we don't have a challenge with here because we have an atmosphere. But because on Mars there's no atmosphere, you need something between you and that radiation. On the other hand, you want to have connection to the outdoors. You want to have light penetrating that. The second thing is with this 3D printing and the idea of using materials of Mars, we're kind of set back in our construction type, where we're working on very thick masonry walls. I think we spoke earlier this morning, like thickness is not a challenge with printing, it's thinness, right? So thinness is more of a challenge. So trying to find a condition where we don't have to live underground, some of the first projects were, well, let's develop these very thin skins for these domes, but we'll have to live in lava tubes below the level of the surface to protect us from the radiation. That's kind of the first kind of solution. But looking deeper to things where we can live on the surface, like the ice project is really interesting, where water actually works as a protection from radiation. So if you can surround the skin of the building with a certain thickness of water or ice, it both lets light in, but also is protected. There's another project we didn't talk about called this termite mound that combines crushed glass with earth and then allows the walls to kind of be penetrated.
So actually, if you see my bag over here, we have a 3D printed version.
Hold it up.
Yeah, just the red 3D printed.
The little termite mound.
Right, so it looks very heavy, it looks very thick like mountain, but it actually has a transparent, translucent condition to it. So I'm really interested in how it kind of sets us back because of the different conditions on Mars. Helps the students to think in a very different way than we're thinking now about thin skins on the Earth. How can we kind of make these kind of solve this duality of challenges with the skin?
So, but it's really interesting because we're watching the processes of the Earth and the creatures of the Earth doing some miraculous things like termite mounds. And I mean, they're really well engineered, they're insulated, they're they're lit, they're dark, they provide room for life and reproduction and food and all of that. And I mean, there's an intelligence on Earth in every creature that is so phenomenal that we're just beginning to understand and learn from. And so you guys who are working on these kind of outer space situations can also bring to us kind of a new appreciation of all of this. Because it's a really interesting thing to learn about ourselves and our own home planet. And we don't have to get out to kind of experience the new way of thinking. So
I was just going to speak to that. I mean, biomimicry is kind of one of the driving forces. In my class at OSIS, actually, we're looking at these Martian conditions specifically through the lens of biomimicry. And what's interesting is I think that the students there are really looking at, we're giving them Martian challenges, but they're looking to Earth to kind of solve these challenges. And I think you're right that like all the answers are in nature. Nature is such an intelligent being in every way, and I think that the closer we can look at nature, we can solve so many of these problems. And I think already many of the entries for Master to Design are looking at ideas from biomimicry and how we can look to nature to solve these problems.
yeah, go ahead. Talk into it.
I think when you were talking, I wanted to ask a question that I think is really intriguing. Is I'm not going to go to Mars. I don't want to go to Mars, and it's great, but I won't be around. And but I do think what's interesting about the presentation is the way in which the research that is going on has applicabilities back on our terra firma. So that's one thing we can all take away from that. And like the ice building or all of the stuff we could do right now, and it's pretty fascinating. It's just like Tang. I would call it the Tang effect, where they make it out of outer space, but we drink it here.
That's really important. So you made a point. Tang. Why would we want to drink Tang? That's the question. I thought we're back to fresh sweets. Okay. Paulette, I want to follow up on something. So you showed several pieces from Herzog and Mura's sort of transparency but patterning, interesting patterning on glass. I mean, it seems like a very primitive idea of what facades could be, because it's just using another glass and put a layer of decoration on it, and it sort of doesn't carry the conversation further in how do we connect interior, exterior, how does the building become more permeable, how do buildings become more connected to this earth and to the place where they are. What's your assessment of that?
Well, one thing I discovered, this is brand new work for me, so it's in Hoad at the moment, but one thing I discovered with Herzog and Mura's work that would be a counter-argument to what you're saying is that they're a very, very high-end, meticulous architecture firm that's willing to give up the agency over their facades. And I think that the politics involved with that are remarkable. So this isn't just decoration. This is they're giving up the external look of their building to have it be tattooed by somebody like Thomas Roof. I mean, that's pretty radical. So I don't think it's for them about skin. I think that there's a different argument going on there. I think that if I could redo the talk, so this would address you, I think it needs to be reorganized in terms of kind of systemic thinking about this. So you have like paint, plastic, projection, and then it would be a little bit more categorized. And I kind of realized that at the end that it needs that one extra step. So paint would be maybe one that is less spatial and less, forward-thinking. But some of the other ones that we've looked at, like the Gulf Screen project, the Philippe Rom, it's pretty amazing to be thinking like that. So I think it's a spectrum would be my answer.
Okay. So say, can you kind of help me figure out this idea that you're looking at making things that sort of filter the sun, embrace the soleils, the kinds of things that we are now looking at to mediate the climate, open up to the climate, to kind of think about facades and buildings in a different way. And so how do you see that evolving into into something that's much more sophisticated than what we're doing now in terms of building facade manufacturing or invention in that area, which is still pretty much glass and concrete and all of those things that basically we've been working with for a long time.
I think it's actually coming back to this question about envelope. I think in the 20th century we've moved away from thinking about the building envelope as a mediating agent, and it's all about enclosure. It's about controlling the environment. And the thing about the skin now, I think so much technology and development is really about how we can make it perform for human comfort, for aesthetic purposes. And for me, I think the way that we developed the Brise-Soleil's the double layer skin was really we used actually passive cooling systems that has been around for a long time. It's just a question of, can we look back into our limits and traits rather than relying on pure technology? Right? A lead building doesn't have to be B certified, not lead, B certified, but rather to just really understand the techniques of building and working with the environment where the building is situated to smartly understand building envelope. And I think a lot of that technology could also be developed with the industry, because the industries are really interested in better performance, whether it's glass or enclosure, industry with windows, material, and there's always a kind of desire to look for other ways to develop a really smart skin. And that's something I think a lot of people are looking into, especially responsive skin.
So that is sort of the hope of the 21st century, this collaboration between architects and manufacturers and technologies to kind of figure out how all of that could be realized, because we've been talking about that, but you're beginning to see some signs.
Right. And I actually think, the Mars project particularly, that's where you can really feel all of these different disciplines actually collaborating. Because it's not just architects, it's not just psychologists, it's not just the engineers, right? So, and also the material development, and all of that are actually, I think the next wave are really people who can link all of these together, who has the intelligence to not just be siloed into their own discipline, but be able to work across disciplines to develop something that is integrated.
So what we saw on that facade in particular, were those markings on the facade, those openings, were they calibrated to how the sun or the wind hits that facade, and when it does? Was that part of the design?
The design was actually both in terms of how that system can be made, mainly by unskilled laborers, so that they can actually have, we can guarantee the kind of the aesthetics that we want. But also, it was really about working with the concrete specialists there, so that we can build it without it falling. It's a number of it's actually a number of parameters that. So, for instance, even aesthetically, the perforation actually spells out. I didn't mention this. It spells out in Braille the company name, Lafayette 48 repeatedly. So there's I think any component of building is really about looking at the aesthetic, the performance, the way that we actually can rethink the existing conventions that we're used to. So that's the Brise-Soleil is an example of how to bring all of that together, including the laborers.
So was it designed here and taken over to China, or was it designed in China and completely developed there?
One of the things I think a lot of you may know is that when you work in China, you give them a napkin sketch, and they say, "See you later. I'll come to you, and maybe I'll talk to you." But this company is actually an amazing company. They work with us throughout the entire process, but we also wanted to make sure that we work with a process that they don't know, or no one really knows how to build, so that they come back to us and work with
But not only that, but you're challenging them. You're challenging everybody, which you know, when you think about how architects used to challenge their craftspeople, I mean, then they said for years, well, that craftspeople don't do anything. And now you have these amazing people doing some great things with you because you're creating it together. And so they're part of it.
Yeah, I really should give them credit because the partner firm that we work with, this is not a building that's typical anywhere. So they were just kind of shocked and it's like, how are we going to build this? And so they really took up the challenge and worked with us.
Well, that's the one that they're going to bring their kids near and say, Dad built that one, but Mom built it. It's really, it takes pride also. But I think we're going to open up for questions, but I have a last question for the Mars group. I mean, as you know, I'm totally fascinated by this, and I've been living outer space for like 30 years. More. And so, you know, it's really interesting. What are some of the collaborations you have with NASA and with manufacturers and with material innovators on this kind of project? Because this is a perfect sort of prototype for how more materials, new materials and new processes can be developed. So is there anyone on the team who would like to tackle that one?
So we, I have to say because we're separate entities, and my company is called Mars City Design, and we work with absolutely everybody. From a burger flipper that will need to modify his flipper to make burgers in a microgravity, to JR, who is from the SETI Institute, a geologist who actually his job is to travel on Earth to places where no human has ever been and find out the quality of lava tubes and different rocks, basalt, and all these material that you can find on Mars, and propose like programs for Mars analogs. And this is where he would come with us and try to see which design would be best to build. And NASA has different programs. So NASA is huge. So we collaborate with the Mars rover department, and also we have different SBIR program. For example, for the health of astronaut psychology, we are applying a grant to develop this device that is called mood adjuster, which I think each of us need.
What is that?
So mood adjuster is like a device that can biotune, that can read your retina, your skin, and describe the level of stress and why. And then it suggests you different nutrition or different scent, different type of music that will be personalized to who you are, what state of mind you're at, and which level of focus you want to be at. It's so important for astronauts in a long duration of flight because they are the pilot for their craft. If they just panic, like you have watched in so many sci-fi movies, you will just die. So it's crucial, but think about the need of like different teenagers in school, or maybe veterans, or even myself, before presentation, or so these are different areas, not just architecture, that we are working on. So basically creating a new world. So we have to think differently from our specialized career, specialized work.
So just think it changed the whole mood of the state of New Jersey.
I was actually thinking that I want to take your system and then plug it into some kind of liquid gel illuminated facade so that you could then read the mood of the neighborhood. I think Lars Boybert actually did this, right?
I think so. Okay, questions from the audience? Anyone?
Thank you all. Fascinating. I have a question for the Mars team. So much of architecture seems like it's about the context and whatever it is that you're building and having some response to, relationship to, or leveraging, your surroundings. And I was struck by, with the exception of maybe the one that went underground and sort of created that cathedral with the Mars sort of soil, how insular a lot of these designs are. And I'm just wondering, whether it just felt like reproducing Earth, the landscapes, the burger flipping, and so what's Mars sort of adding to that? And really, it's a big.
We don't know yet.
Check back with them in about 10 years. Since you have a resident Martian there, you can just ask them. Next question.
Yes, thank you so much. It was really great. The discussion is kind of between a yin and yang, between the performative on the one hand and the aesthetic and the feelings, which is kind of the theme of the conversation on the other. And I think the performative side, we pretty much understand how to measure that, right? But I'm wondering if any of you would like to comment on how do we measure the success of the aesthetic side? In other words, whether it's a Martian environment or even a Herzog and Neuron building, the performative measuring is easy. The aesthetic measuring, a little more challenging, and I'm wondering if anyone would like to comment on it.
And the question is, should we even try to measure the aesthetic?
Well, measure whether it's successful. How do you know if it's been successful?
I was going to say, I think there's some value. I think we were looking at the precedents for the kind of experiments for Mars and the high seas NASA dome, for example, and the Mars 500. And I think there's a way, I think that design was not really considered in these places. We interviewed an architect that spent 1 year in the dome, and he said they just put it together cheapest way they could do, like slapped up some plywood, painted it white. They didn't really consider design at all. And I think the way you measure that is if you actually had architects and designers think about what this dome might be for a year and compare it to another team that are living in this dome that's created by NASA, which is really just about functionality. You might then be able to test out some of the psychological effects of living in those close quarters for extended periods. So I think there are ways of doing it, but that's the issue with the designers. I'm not part of that conversation right now, but they're not, it's purely a scientific experiment. It's not really kind of psychological design experiment.
You just triggered a thought about that, because we tend to think of aesthetics in isolation from the term anesthetize, but in fact they're embedded in each other. So to anesthetize would be to take away pain or to put somebody to sleep. But to aestheticize is in fact the opposite. It's to wake you up and stimulate you. So I think that's absolutely built into your project.
Just think anything is going to be better than what Mark Kelly lived in for a year. I mean, that is astounding that he actually didn't come back tearing no hair out. I mean, maybe he got hair before he left. So I think the next panel is ready. And I really wanted to thank this panel. You're spectacular. And I want to hear even more about